All right, you guys, here it is. It is time for the championship match of which sport is better, which is the better sport. And our championship match, we got two sports that have survived it. So this is the fourth round of competition. So they've survived, and not only survived, they have been victorious in the past 3 rounds of competition. So we have a sport included in the Summer Olympic Games, is one of the competitors in this round, and that sport is fencing. And fencing is facing off against a sport included in the Winter Olympic Games, and that sport is curling. And so I will evaluate, so this is the last round, the very final championship matchup of which sport is better, fencing or curling. And that's what I aim to decide in this video. And so I will evaluate these sports relative to each other, compared to each other, and then discuss a question, which is expansion of the sport. So I have to think and rack my brain for ways I could see these sports expanding in the future in a realistic, not a realistic, in a reasonable sense. So, fencing, curling. Fencing is a solo sport. It's a summer sport per current setup of the Olympic Games. I don't know, technically it's indoors. I don't know if indoor sports were included in the Winter Olympic Games in the past. I don't obsess over things like that, but I could see potentially, or not potentially, I have no idea, but indoor sports, who knows, maybe one day they'll be in the Winter Olympics, that kind of thing. So currently they're in the Summer Olympics. Curling is an ice sport, so it's conducted on ice, so it's a part of the Winter Olympic Games. I don't know if that's actually the criteria as to why it's part of the Winter Olympic Games, but it is a winter sport per the Olympic Games. And it is a small team sport, and this is a solo sport. And both sports have actually longer apparatuses. So there's what I call a large or huge or giant hockey puck, which is not a hockey puck in curling. And in fencing, there are, in curling, there's also brooms. And then in fencing, there are what I have dubbed large metal toothpicks, epis, foils, and sabers. And so those are kind of the apparatuses. This requires skin to be clothed on a large scale, including the head and neck. And there's protective equipment that is worn. There's kind of protective equipment, like in the sense of you not really kind of like if you fall, I guess, in curling on the ice kind of thing. And yeah, and so I have fenced, I have not curled. So I'm kind of, in the first round, I talked about my experience with these. I have watched both of these. Maybe that's more fair evaluation criteria. I actually, so from a spectator's perspective, I really like these. I think to be like a bit candid, I think and in talking through all 16 of these sports in multiple rounds of competition, to be like truly candid, it'd be really fun to compete in these sports, like at the Olympic level. Like, there's some of these sports where it's just, would I want to participate in the Olympic Games in this sport? And even if I'm like really good at it, and it's kind of like, no. And like thinking about this as I talk through it, I kind of realized, and part of it for certain sports is largely the dynamic of the sport at the Olympic Games. Like outside of the Olympic Games, it's okay, but at the Olympic Games, it kind of takes on a different feel and tone, and maybe that tone has become more toxic over time, stuff like that. On the kind of world level, and so it's kind of like, no, I wouldn't really. But these are two, like, it's an interesting championship pairing, because like I kind of want to do curling, and I would love to return to fencing, that kind of thing. So yeah. Oh, I just realized I didn't show my rugby ball at any point during this. If I remember, I'll put it in the final recap. And so, yeah. So that's actually a bit of a leveling, is these are both really cool sports. I'm gonna put it as simple as that. So we are left with an evaluation criteria that I have not used in previous rounds, and that is expansion of the sport, ? And so I'm gonna start with fencing. So fencing, this one for me has always been obvious. And since the first time I picked up, was it a foil or an ippy? I can't remember which one was the first one I picked up. It was one of those two. It wasn't a saber because I was really mad because I really wanted the saber. And, okay, not mad, but I was just like, I want the saber. That's my favorite of the 3 sizes. But for fencing, it was kind of, for me, this answer is obvious, and it's not, at least at the Olympic level. I completely understand why this is like, it's a very real potential injury, is using like a full-size sword in fencing. But that is a very real, like that used to be used in combat, swords did. So like fencing in that sense and like sword fighting, they're technically different things, at least per today's kind of definitions. Like in the past, people would have actually had to know, like, in essence, kind of how to fence with a sword. They're heavier, so the balance is different. A sword is compared to the large metal toothpicks used in fencing today. But that is one avenue of potential expansion, a reasonable. Like, it is bigger. For safety purposes, I don't know if it would be like at a global level. I mean, it's been used in combat in a global level before, swords have. So yeah, in that sense, it's reasonable. Any other? Well, if we wanted to go, like, I mentioned, well, maybe one day it'll be included in the Winter Olympic Games. And this is like, I think, not that it would take the sport out of it, but it would just, it's reasonable, but I don't know how entertaining it would be. And I think fencing is already a difficult enough sport that I don't know if it would actually work, is fencing on ice. Like if you really wanted to play devil's advocate and be like, you have to have water in some form, like frozen form, as part of a Winter Olympic sport, you could do fencing on ice. And that would just be like, I think, a nightmare, to be honest. Like, cause you like poke the opponent and you both slide. Or like if you had skates on or something on ice, then I suppose you'd have to learn how to position your foot so that you didn't slide as you, so yeah, actually on a sports level, that would require a different skill set of development while also having the same foundational skills as fencing on land. Yeah, so those are 2 kind of interesting avenues of potential expansion for fencing. For curling, well, in my research for my Ireland heritage travel trip, I have found that Ireland actually has like ski resorts that are set up so people can ski without snow. And that's just like, not like it blows my mind, but like mind-boggling. I'm like, I kind of want to go to one of those places, and like it's been forever since I've skied, so I'd probably hurt myself if I did that. But like, could you curl without the ice? And then it's kind of like, well, it's like giant shuffleboard, so there's kind of something like that already. Okay, so that avenue of expansion, kind of not so much. But curling, so there are 3 events currently, and it's men's, women's, and mixed is men's and women's, so like you get men and women potentially like competing together. And so there's kind of, to me it feels kind of obvious when I watch the sport. I love watching the sport. It's one of the only Olympic sports in fencing. Okay, this is kind of poetic in a nice way that these 2 are together. These are sports that I would love to see more of, and especially curling. Curling is like one of those ones that I stumbled upon, and I was just like, this is slightly addictive, like in a good way. And it was just like, if anything, I want more of this. And so the immediate one that comes to mind, there are 2 on like a reasonable winter sport expansion kind of way. And one is varying the length between starting point and target in curling. So it could make it a much longer pathway or a shorter pathway. So kind of like in track and field, there are different distances of sprints. So having different curling distances. So that's one. And then the other one, and this would be like, it would be wicked awesome if they could pull this off. Or not they, but like if they could do it. Like, I think, like, I'm already mind boggled, and like I think about this and I'm like, I had this idea a while ago and I was like, I don't even know if it's possible, but then I was like thinking through it and I was like, yeah, it is reasonable. I don't know how easy it would be, or like how reasonable it would be with a straight track curling. So currently curling is conducted on a straight track, and my idea, or an idea for expansion would be a bent track, so like slightly curved. And that could be like super hard, and then it kind of comes down to like, well, would it be like bowling? Would you have gutters or bumpers like for this giant hockey puck as it's moving, kind of on the edge of it, not a track. So it wouldn't be like bobsled, for example, where the track kind of slopes, because the giant hockey puck is heavy enough that if it was a bent track, I'm still gonna call it a track, a bent track that the giant hockey puck is moving on, if it's bent, it couldn't really be tilted, because then it would just kind of slide because it's so heavy. So then it'd have to be a flat track but bent ever so slightly. So if there was straight curling and then curved curling, bendy curling, and that's reasonable too. And I don't know like what curvature would be a good curvature. I think at some point it does become unreasonable, like you don't per curling and like kind of how it works. But I think like could actually potentially come up with a curvature where curling actually works on a flat track, ice track. I don't know. So those are my avenues kind of expansion. And I guess an analog might be comparing, like, so a 100-meter dash is straight. A 100-meter dash with hurdles has obstacles. A 800-meter dash is technically middle distance, but it requires going around curves on a track, versus a 100-meter dash does not. And so in that sense, even the summer, or not even, but the summer sports have straight and curved tracks. In some races where it's straight and curved. I don't think they're just curved. It depend on like, if you, okay, maybe jumpers, like high jump or something, kind of curved, depend on how the runner runs. Yeah, so those are kind of my potential avenues of expansion for curling. And yeah, and so I don't, in terms of like, I would watch all of that. I don't know how, I think the fencing on ice is like so absurd that like, I don't like, but like there's actually places in the world where that might have actually been a thing during wartime. Like, to stop and think about that, which is kind of, so actually, if we go back to the history books and stuff like that, and especially battles conducted in Arctic places, like, that might have actually happened in the past, kind of thing. So that'd be really cool. So it might actually be possible, and it might have been done not on, like, a sport level, or maybe on a sport level. Maybe people actually do that thing and I'm just not aware. Maybe people do all these things and I'm just not aware of it. But those are, from my context and what I've experienced in life, those are my ideas for like expansion of these sports. And so which one, how am I evaluating this as like a which one? Well, I would watch all of that. I think the fencing on ice thing, just the realization of that actually probably has happened in the past, that kind of just blew my mind. So I might actually like, and the potential for full sword fighting. I'm still like, from day one in fencing club, I was like, sword, I want a sword, I want to fight with a sword. That'd be so cool. Like, and I know sword fighting is different than fencing, but it'd be cool if there was some way to make that like competition level. So I guess I'm going to give it championship round to fencing for the potential of full-sized swords one day, in a non-combat setting. That would be very cool, and it would keep people trained on how to use those weapons properly, so then it doesn't become some group that becomes very well used and then they wreak havoc on everybody else. It would keep other people trained on how to use swords as well. Yeah. Though I like both. I like expansion ideas. I like the expansion ideas for both of these sports. So I guess on the sword fighting potential and the fencing on ice, which the mind blowing like that, there's a very good chance and probability that that has actually already happened. Like, and that might have actually been a very common thing, and might be a very common thing in certain parts of the world. Like, fencing's gonna take it. Yeah. So which sport is better? Fencing edges it out on this one. Fencing wins. Championship round. Which sport is better? So which sport is better, fencing or curling? I'm gonna have to give it to fencing. On guard.